it's been over a month where her nomination has been sitting unattended to. The Ethics Commission had a meeting yesterday, which she could not participate in because of your delay and your negligence. Fortunately, the Ethics Commission, the 3 commissioners that were there, were smart enough to delay and defer some of their business another meeting so that they could attend with a full commission rather than the 3 that were there. And it's just a stunning contrast how Aaron Pack, who was the latest appointee to be confirmed and is a fundraiser for Councilman Wesson and Eric Garcetti and a lot of the other bigwigs, was rushed through without even public comment, without even her even addressing the city council in December of last year. And it's just a great example of how there's disparate treatment between the good guys in the city council and the ones that do your bidding. And when we're talking about the Ethics Commission here, I think your conduct should be at a higher level. And I'm really disappointed that you could somehow find the time and the energy to fast-track Aaron Pack within less than a week last December, but it's taken you well over a month to get Jessica Levinson a hearing when her credentials far exceed, in fact, it's not even close, exactly what Aaron Pack brought to the Ethics Commission and continues to bring to the Ethics Commission, which is nothing more than connections to you, your fundraisers, and your network of influence, which is exactly what the Ethics Commission is supposed to do.
Thank you. Thank you. How many meetings has this committee had since September? I think this is our first meeting. So in our first meeting, we're handling this piece of business. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes, it's Eric Previn, the county resident from District 3. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I hope jury duty went well yesterday. We missed you at the Ethics Commission. We know you were hoping to be there to address the commission about the new era in front of us, and we noted your election commission that you're teaming up with the mayor about. That all sounds very, very, very positive. And obviously, Jessica Levinson is an excellent choice. This is a good candidate for the Ethics Commission. And I have to echo that the Aaron Pack matter was fell short of what we expect, especially for the Ethics Commission. That was pushed through quickly. The LA Times and others commented about it, and yet nobody did anything about it, which was disconcerting. And of course, I don't mean to put a lot on Jessica's plate that's not her business, but I do think she's got the right training for this kind of stuff, and I hope she can contribute in a positive manner. It's interesting you mentioned when this board, this council met on, this may be the first time that this has come up, but the Ethics Commission itself has also been on a teeny bit of a hiatus, which is approximately 4 months, and that's not any individual's fault, but we expect a teeny bit more roll-up-the-sleeves enthusiasm for the work here. And in public comment, I'll make a proposal that you may like more than this kind of a speech, which is one in which I urge this group of, I guess clearly by definition, these are incumbents, to provide support for the Ethics Commission in a way that will allow them to really do what's necessary, which is, I think, enforcement where we're trying, but we have a problem with enforcement in the Ethics Commission, which is we immediately lower virtually any fine down to about 50% of what's required, which I think sends the wrong signal. But maybe the meetings, which are up on the 10th floor, could be more attended by council members. Maybe there's a way to make the efficacy of this Ethics Commission more impressive. And
Thank you.
I think Ms. Levinson.
Thank you, sir. Okay, and I do. Where's Heather? I was really looking forward to being before the commission yesterday, and I learned a very valuable lesson that I will share with my colleagues sometime today. When you get called on jury duty and they send that one person out to go through orientation, don't mess with that person. I did and paid the price. But I'm done. I'm free now. All right. So with that said, I just wanted to have you come forward, but I wanted check to our maybe commissioner-to-be to just have her tell a little bit about herself and why you'd have an interest in serving on this commission.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for holding this hearing. So I'll give you the brief version, which is that I study this area. This is my area that I focus on as a professor at Loyola Law School. I actually went to law school with the understanding that I would do something related to politics and the law, and I'm lucky enough to be an election law professor now. So this is the area I write in, this is the area that I study, and when City Controller Galpern called me and asked me if I was interested in this position, I thought it was a wonderful opportunity to contribute, to give back, to serve the public, and to understand what happens from inside the agency.
Okay, well, I have the highest respect for the entire ethics team that we have over here, so I'm going to ask our leader if she would like to add or give some suggestions or recommendations where it relates to this appointment.
Good morning, council members. Heather Holt for the Ethics Commission. We did miss you yesterday, but we certainly appreciate your doing your civic duty.
Are we going to reschedule?
We are definitely
Okay.
going to reschedule. We would love to have you at our next regular meeting, so I will definitely contact
Okay.
your office about that. Thank you. We are pleased to have the opportunity to work with a commissioner who does have some experience in the area that we focus on, particularly campaign finance laws. It will be nice to have someone who can hit the ground running on these issues, and we look forward to learning from her expertise and sharing ours.
Okay. Any questions from you, Mr. Labange?
No, I just think it's real important. I long ago advocated, Ben Bicel was the director of ethics then. I don't know if you remember his name. I said, Ben, you're in the mall. You should be in City Hall. And no, I like being outside because that was his philosophy, be outside to look in. I've said to Ms. Holt a number of times, I think you should be on the second and third floor on this issue here. I don't like all the committee rooms, Mr. Holden. You recall.
Holden?
Mr. Holden, no, you recall in Mr. Holden's time. I'm retracting it there.
I recall his first 6 years.
Yeah, I got it, but in that period, I'm sorry, Mr. Wesson.
I'm just messing with
fast. All the committee rooms were on the second floor and
Yeah.
some on the third floor. And then in the re-establishment of this building with earthquaking and the reshuffling, they moved them all up to the 10th floor. You get more done in the halls of City Hall, than you do in City Hall. You see people in the halls of City Hall. I would love to see the Ethics Commission come closer to the third floor or whatever floor that they would, second floor, whatever it is. And if there needs to be more committee rooms down here closer, Mr. President would be happy because we could start council on time instead of having them come all the way down from the 10th floor. That being said, your credentials are impeccable, and so this is exciting. Ethics is extremely important in the conversation that we have, and it's not just all about money. It's about what we say about people. And I've said before in political campaigns, sometimes someone says something about someone which is not true, and then that person has to fight that battle. I would just ask for anybody who has public funding in a campaign in the future that they have to file a report, and in that one report would list the top 25 issues that maybe neighborhood councils see in the city. And what is your position on the streetcar on Broadway? What is your position on the LA River? So there's an established ethical standard of what rent control, big ticket issues on reforming whatever it is. Then it's filed with the Ethics Commission, and then as you go through, because you're part of the process too, you partner, then there would be some basis. So in a campaign, if I take public money and I say my opponent doesn't believe in rent control when they do, you could then find that's unethical. It's not just money. And I know the First Amendment, is there a city attorney here? I don't see a city attorney here, but I guess he's not listening. There's a city attorney here. I'm looking at our council city attorney on that. I know our great city attorney here from ethics. But I think that's an important value, and I'd love to contribute. Unfortunately, they have a thing called term limits. And I'm on I don't want to say I'm on the third term, but I got 20 months or 17 months or whatever it is. I'm not in Folsom, so I'm not counting them.
Don't
like
count
that.
them.
But it's coming, and I want to see it being done better. I was the first candidate in the city's history to do public financing in 1992. And I lost my election, I believe, by 400 votes because my opponent said I didn't believe in rent control. And from that day in 92 to this day today, I think there should be some basis to start. That was legal at the time. You could say whatever you could say, but I think if you're going public finance, that's your partner. And ethics is what your values are. So I think you got that. You got such a great background, and I just am glad. And I just want to say to the public comment, we also have telephones now. And I answer my phone, and Mr. Wesson answers the phone. We have a public rope. You come right up here and tell us. If we're behind, let us know, because there's so many competing interests. Sorry for the delay. I'm glad you're here today. Remember that song? Sorry for the delay. I'm glad you're here today. Hank Williams.
I remember, and I will not sing, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. And if it were in my power to give you another term, I would gladly do that, because you will be missed, but we're not counting. Not one day. Now, I've been establishing a relationship with the new controller, Mr. Galprin, and he's a delight to work with. I have heard nothing but unbelievable things where it relates to you, Ms. Levinson. And so I think this is, Heather, a unique opportunity for us to have not just a legal beagle, but one who specializes in this, and that should be kind of exciting, and I think unbelievably helpful. So without objection, Mr. Labange, I would suggest that we recommend to the council that she be confirmed.
Second, strong second.
Okay, so without objection, that'll be the order, and congratulations in step one. And I feel good about step two. So congratulations.
If you feel good, I feel good.
Well, we both do. Look forward to working with you in the future.
I do too, very much.
All right.
When will it be in council, Madam Clerk?
This morning.
That's
Good,
what I
okay,
thought.
so you got an hour to change our minds if you want us to.
I'll do my best. Thank you.
Yeah, do research on us. You may not want to do this. Okay. So anyway, like I said, without objection, that'll be the order. That brings us to item 11. And I've got some public comment cards on that. Hey, Arno, I have two. Oh, no, one of these, I think, Mr. Sachs, is general public. Okay, so let me call you forward on 11. And Eric, if I can call you forward on item 11 as well.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I have been advised by the city attorney that because you have a number of amendments to this item, it would be best to read those into the record before public comment is given so that commenters can...
Okay, so is that why Dion ran up here like Flash and is,
that is
out
exactly
of breath? Okay, so Arnold, Eric, you guys can slowly make your way up as we read into the record the amendments. Go right ahead.
And for the record, item 11 is a City Ethics Commission report relative to recommended changes to the city's governmental ethics ordinance.
And on that item before you are additionally amendments to 12 parts of the proposed ordinance, which I will detail as follows. In the first part, amendments to the recommendations related to the semi-annual list of all city contractors and bidders. The amendments to that would be to provide that the city will have one comprehensive official database for restricted sources that are covered under sections 49.5.2, section N, subsection 1, subsection B, and subsection 2B, maintained by the City Ethics Commission and updated on a quarterly basis, and revise section 49.5.12B accordingly. All contracts, whether housed in a separate city database or not, will be included in the City Ethics Commission's database. Another amendment to that section is to provide that the city will provide the City Ethics Commission adequate staffing and funding to create, maintain, and update the database. And finally, to provide the City Ethics Commission with the authority to notify the mayor, the city attorney, the city controller, the city council, and the respective general managers or executive directors of any delinquencies after 5 days of the due dates of filings. You also have amendments proposed to the parts that deal with restricted sources of funding. Those are to set a restricted source gift limit at 33% of the gift limit under the Political Reform Act as adjusted by regulation and rounded to the nearest $10. To provide clarity that city officials shall comply with the gift limitations and requirements of the Political Reform Act, and that section precedes the section on restricted sources. To add back into section C3 that a part reading, a restricted source shall not act as an agent or an intermediary in or arrange for the making of a gift by another person to a city official that exceeds the applicable limit. Add back into section C1, a city official shall not solicit a gift from a restricted source, and a city official shall not accept a gift from a restricted source that exceeds the applicable limit. To include the educational institution under exemptions located in the Municipal Code section 49.5.8 C4E, an amendment to provide clarity that the gift limit with respect to lobbyists and lobbying firms is 0, an amendment to provide restricted source gift limits that are not applicable to section 49.5.2 M1B and 2B sources until the Ethics Commission and the Los Angeles City Council certify an official database that identifies those restricted sources, and to provide that official databases covering those sections is a reference for compliance and enforcement of those sections. One final amendment to the part dealing with restricted sources is to provide a thorough disclaimer that the official database that covers those sections is indeed the reference compliance and enforcement, or for enforcement purposes as the database is updated. There are also amendments proposed to sections related to political activity, which is to remove the word wearing that's used in that section, replace it with appropriate language, and to remove the sentence that deals with personal vehicles. An amendment related to political activity, which is to change the word "this includes" to the words "this may include." An amendment to the section dealing on the misuse of city position or resources, and that's to replace proposed language with the following to reflect current case law. And the following language is, "This section does not prohibit the use of city resources to provide information to the public about the possible effects of a bond issue or ballot measure relating to city activities when the use of public resources is otherwise legally authorized." An amendment to the permanent lobbying ban, which is to add back language that notes that and substantially, or to add back language and substantially, as well as the last sentence of section that defines personal and substantial, which is in the Municipal Code, section 49.5.14b. You have several amendments proposed for you relating to time-based lobbying bans. And that's to delete all provisions in the proposed ordinance and replace them with a 12-month ban for any city lobbying that applies to the mayor, city attorney, city controller, council members, the Board of Public Works commissioners, general managers, executive directors, chief administrative officers, the mayor's chief of staff, the deputy mayor, mayoral aides 7 and 8, the assistant city attorneys, chief deputy controllers, administrative deputy controllers, public relations deputy controllers, council aides 6 and 7, and equivalent positions upon them leaving city service. For all other SEI Form 700 filers, provide a 1-year ban for lobbying the agency that they were employed by, loaned to, or assigned in the past 2 years. Remove the definition of high-level official since it is no longer needed. Moving on, you have amendments before you to add back in the last section under the Municipal Code, section 49.5.14J, and amend it into section 49.5.14A as the last sentence of that section in order to clarify that commissioners may appear before a city agency as members of the general public on matters related to their personal interests. You have an amendment before you to rewrite section 48.5.8.C4C to read that items received by a city official from an organization to which the city official acting in an official city capacity, or the city official's agency belongs. You have a 10th proposed amendment to delete and remove all provisions of the proposed section 49.5.9 and related issues in other sections. You have an amendment to request the Ethics Commission to report back to the City Council with any necessary changes to the administrative code in order to implement these amendments by January 6, 2014. And finally, you have an amendment to authorize a city attorney in consultation with the executive director of the City Ethics Commission and the chair of the Rules, Elections, and Intergovernmental Relations Committee to make any necessary technical or legal changes to these amendments in order to implement the proposed changes in a new draft ordinance.
Thank you. Mr. Sachs, Mr. Previn, please come forward. You can come on and go first. There's no hard and fast rule.
Very informal.
Good morning.
Yes. Good morning. It's Eric Previn, the county resident from District 3. I just wanted to make a proposal here. I think that many of those who are paying attention know that there's a joint effort with public health between the county and the city, whereas the city funds the public health department. And that's being questioned by AIDS Healthcare at the moment, and everybody's against it, it seems, except for that group. There are other ways in which the city and the county team up. For example, the Olympics, I think we were all pulling in that direction to get them to come here, and that's positive. They have a $362 million additional revenue piece that landed on their desk recently. And they, quickly, Mr. Fujioka did a great job of squirreling away, and then at the end of the year, look at that. That's a lot of money. And then the supervisors have a chance to deploy it accordingly in various ways. And I really think that in the same way that we share on public health, maybe ethics, maybe open government, because, I think there's great frustration with what the District Attorney's Office and the Public Integrity Division is able to do in this category. I think that there's a lot of frustration with the oversight of the Board of Supervisors themselves, because they have set it up very nicely so that the executive officer of their group is the authority. So that's a little close, and many people are concerned about that. And I've had some run-ins about lobbying ordinances, and as you know, there's a lot of lobbying activity in both of these buildings. Now, the City Ethics Commission, to their credit, have put together a top 10 lobbyist sort of a chart that's actually pretty positive. Your Commissioner Hockman was really excited about it 5 months ago when it came out, and yet it's still kind of buried. I'd like to bring it forward. But my proposal is, let's get these fine council people, and I know this is not all of you, but we can discuss it again, to get the supervisors to say, hey, let's team up. We are so, clean that we want better oversight across, because it makes no sense that we should have one set of rules for a city, one set of rules for the county. And I just want to finish up in 5 seconds or less. San Francisco, there's lots of precedents, has one ethics commission. And
City County.
what's that? City County.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I mean that. Thank you. Mr. Sachs?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Arnold Sachs. Just really quick, these ethic amendments that you're making, do they also cover the proprietary departments of the City of LA? I know they're not under the council, the auspices of the council, but just curious, do they cover the airport? Do they cover the harbor? Do they cover? So they do cover those. So here's a concern.
They don't cover Lennox, though.
Well,
Okay, Mr. Levine.
thank you. I appreciate that. And, that could be good and bad, because the previous speaker mentioned dealing with the county. That's a whole different can of worms. So my question would be, anything about lobbyists to staff? There should be a time frame between when a lobbyist becomes a staff member. We had a situation with Councilman Price in his district with somebody who was a lobbyist who's now been added to his staff. And staff to lobbyists, there should be a cooling off period also there, where staff members should have to wait an extended period of time or a certain period of time before they can become members of lobbyist groups to come before the city council. But my concerns are basically, there was a story about the DWP, and we've just had a lot of information about how the DWP has done this and that and the other thing. And it's about 2 DWP nonprofits that were organized by the nonprofit, and yet they're going to self-audit themselves. And here's a story that says they get $4 million a year. The head of the commission wants them to go back 10 years. So I'm not sure if that's $40 million or $80 million. But again, it's the ethical thing.
Issue, Arnold.
How can
Or the item.
commission a DWP department? How come a department is allowed to self-audit itself? That just makes absolutely no sense. And City Attorney Mike Fuhrer pushed for $1 billion for Measure R, but he automatically knew that that would be doubling.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, now let's hear from Heather or Ms. Hope, and why don't you walk us through? And again, it's a pleasure to see you and your most of your team here today. And Madam City Attorney, why don't you come forward as well? You've been part of this family, this team. Yes.
Good morning again. Heather Holt for the Ethics Commission. Thank you for the very warm welcome. I'm glad to be here. We do have in front of you a set of recommendations that the Ethics Commission is pleased to make with regard to the Governmental Ethics Ordinance, or the GEO. The GEO was originally adopted in 1990 as a way to help ensure that that city decisions are made with equity and impartiality in mind. And to that end, the GEO largely regulates the conduct of city officials and employees. The recommendations in front of you represent the first comprehensive review that the GEO has undergone since it was first enacted. It also represents many months of work on the part of the Ethics Commission. Over about a year and a half, we analyzed data and solicited comment from the public and from regulated communities. We had a series of sometimes animated public meetings over these issues, and the result is what's in front of you today. In addition to preserving the GEO's underlying goals of equity and impartiality, one of the goals of the review was also to clarify and simplify the laws wherever possible. The recommendations fall into 6 broad categories. There is financial disclosure, there are gifts, misuse of city position, outside employment, revolving door, and enforcement. And I'd be happy to highlight just a few of the key recommendations as we see them, if that's helpful to you.
Okay, I will ask you to do that, but why don't we have our other 2 people at the center table, in fact, Tristan in particular, introduce yourself, say where you work, what you do, because by the look in your eye, I have a feeling that you don't intend to add to this conversation. So I at least want you on the record.
Not unless specifically asked. David Tristan, Deputy Executive Director with the City Ethics Commission. Good morning, council members.
Good to see you. Yes.
Good morning, council members. Deputy City Attorney Renee Stottle.
Always a pleasure to see you. Okay, why don't you highlight what you feel is important? And then a couple of things were said by Mr. Sachs in particular. Maybe there's a question or 2 of his that you might be in a position to answer. So, have at it.
Thank you. I'm happy to do that. One of the key recommendations that we make goes to financial disclosure. Currently, under state law, about 6,000 city employees are required to file statements of economic interests with us, and through which they disclose specific types of personal financial holdings. The state requires these when they assume office, when they leave office, and annually in between. In addition to that, the GEO requires a semi-annual update to the Statement of Economic Interest for high-level officials. The thinking when this was originally adopted was that the semi-annual update would provide helpful additional information about personal interests that could affect city decisions and play into conflicts of interest. The reality, however, is that the vast majority of filers have nothing to report that's any different from what they reported through the state's annual filing. Regardless of that, the filing is still required, so it involves a lot of staff resources on the part of the filers and on the part of the Ethics Commission for not much at all in the way of helpful information for the public. So the Ethics Commission recommends eliminating the semi-annual filing and relying on the state's annual schedule for statements of economic interest. In addition, this Ethics Commission recommends modifying and actually updating the definition of high-level official. It's currently based on titles, city titles, some of which are outdated, some of which refer to departments that no longer even exist, and the definition itself is not consistent. It refers to some department heads, but not all department heads. So the Ethics Commission recommends updating that definition to be consistent and clarify that every department head is a high-level city official, and also to focus on city duties rather than city titles when deciding who is a high-level official. Some of the other key recommendations that the Ethics Commission is making go toward the issue of gifts. The state law imposes gift requirements, regulations on city officials, and the GEO does as well. Currently, there are 2 different definitions of the word gift, one in state law and one in city law. We recommend eliminating the definition in city law in the GEO and deferring to the state's definition of gift. Not only will this help reduce possible confusion when people are trying to figure out what exactly is a gift in a particular set of circumstances, it will also give the city the benefit of the state's vast regulatory framework with regard to gifts. They have originally, the city was a little ahead of the state in terms of gifts. The state has now far outpaced the city in terms of keeping up with reality and technology and livability.
If you would,
Yes.
Ms. Hope, maybe you could briefly explain to us the difference, or at least the state definition. Maybe you could highlight that specifically.
That is, well, a gift, the basic definition of gift is anything of value that is provided to someone without equal or greater consideration. The city has a number of very specific exceptions to that definition, such as gifts that you might receive from an immediate family member, gifts that you might get through an inheritance, things of that nature, things that you're given at a non-recurring ceremonial event like a wedding. The state has a far broader, far bigger set of exceptions. They recently amended their laws, actually, to create more livability for public officials in terms of gifts. And so things like if you have a pre-existing relationship with someone that doesn't have anything to do with your official duties as a public official, then gifts from them might be accepted from the other regulatory schemes. The state also has extensive regulations about how to value gifts, which the city does not address at all. We have always relied on the state's interpretation of how to value gifts. So again, the elimination of the GEO's definition of gifts gives us a far better framework in terms of both defining the exceptions, what is and what isn't a gift, and how to value them.
I got it.
In addition to that recommendation with regard to gifts, we also make recommendations regarding restricted sources and gifts. Some of those were read into the record by the CLA's office. A restricted source is a concept that is created by the GEO, and it essentially means someone who has active business before the city, whether through lobbying or contracting, permitting, or otherwise trying to influence a city official. Under state law, public officials, city officials, are prohibited from accepting more than a certain amount of gifts per year from a single source. Right now, that limit is $440. So I cannot accept a gift from people who are identified in my conflict of interest code, which gets us a little bit into the weeds, but more than $440 from one particular source in one calendar year. And if I receive $50 or more in gifts from one source in one calendar year, I have to report those gifts on my statement of economic interest, which we propose be done annually and not twice a year. In addition to that limitation, the GEO also limits gifts further from restricted sources. There are two additional limits for restricted sources. For lobbyists and lobbying firms, the GEO prohibits the solicitation and acceptance of any gifts by city officials. For other restricted sources, the limit is $100 per source per calendar year. So city officials currently have three numbers that they have to think about in terms of accepting gifts. The state's $440, $0 for lobbyists and lobbying firms, and then $100 for all other restricted sources. In order to reduce some of that confusion and to treat all restricted sources equitably on the same plane, the Ethics Commission recommends prohibiting the solicitation and acceptance of gifts from any restricted source. This would put the contractors and bidders and people seeking permits and others attempting to influence city officials on the same plane with lobbyists and lobbying firms, in that they do have business before the city, and the perception associated with the possibility of accepting a gift could do damage to the public's confidence in city decision making. In addition to that, the Ethics Commission recognizes that sometimes it can be challenging to determine who is and who is not a restricted source. not with regard to lobbyists, because we have a real-time database on our website that anyone can access day or night to find out who is and who isn't registered as a lobbyist, but particularly with regard to contracting. It is not always abundantly apparent, because of the city's very decentralized contracting processes, who is a bidder, who is a contractor, and therefore who is a contracting restricted source. To help alleviate some of that challenge, the Ethics Commission also recommends that city agencies be required to submit lists of their bidders and contractors to the City Ethics Commission twice a year, and that the Ethics Commission then post that information on its website so that there is a place where people can go to figure out who is a contracting restricted source. If we're going to impose these regulations, then there needs to be a way to comply, and we think that this would facilitate that greatly. Moving on to the issue of misuse of city position, there are a couple of key recommendations. One is with regard to prohibited political activity. The GEO does prohibit certain types of political activity by city employees now based on timing and the use of city resources and that kind of thing. It is a bit vague, and it is not entirely up to date with regard to modern technology. So the Ethics Commission recommends amending that provision to clarify exactly what is and what is not prohibited political activity, and it's modeled after the Hatch Act, which regulates the political activity of federal officials. Another key recommendation is in response to a council motion asking for regulations regarding ex parte communications. The Ethics Commission has proposed regulations for that. An ex parte communication is essentially an off-the-record communication with a decision maker that not all parties are aware of. With regard to ex parte communications in a quasi-judicial setting where due process rights might are in issue, the Ethics Commission recommends that non-elected city decision makers be prohibited from engaging in ex parte communications. The Ethics Commission also recommends that non-elected city decision makers be required to disclose ex parte communications that occur in either quasi-judicial or legislative matters.
Just stretching.
Okay, fair enough. Other key recommendations focus on the enforcement component of the Ethics Commission's work. There are a couple of provisions in the Charter's mandate with regard to the Ethics Commission that are not currently reflected in the GEO, and the Ethics Commission recommends including those. One of them is the requirement that the Ethics Commission investigate and enforce against violations of the GEO, and that it has the authority to impose administrative penalties for any violations that it does find. Other laws within our jurisdiction do reflect that charter mandate, and we recommend including that in the GEO as well. There is also a charter mandate that the Ethics Commission enforce against violations of conflicts of interest, and we recommend incorporating that into the GEO as well. Finally, there is a section in the GEO that protects against retaliation. Currently, city employees cannot be retaliated against for reporting possible violations of certain types of GEO violations. It's not entirely clear how far that extends. It seems to be a little bit internally inconsistent. So the Ethics Commission recommends being very clear, making it as broad as possible, and flatly saying that it is a violation of the GEO to retaliate against any person for reporting a possible violation of any law. So those are some of the key substantive issues. In addition to the substantive changes, we're also recommending a lot of technical improvements to streamline and reorganize and hopefully make things easier for people to understand.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So the amendments have been read into the record, and without objection, we will move forward with the ethics suggestions. I mean, that'll be the order of the day as amended.
And Mr. President?
Yes.
Just for the record, all this information you have is online. Because one time I was doing my job in my district, and a city attorney who lived in the area, not a city attorney in this room right now, was propping all this information as if I was a bad guy, And then I said, listen, all this is online. This is part of the city's ethics law. So they try to use it for a disadvantage, too. It wasn't as ethical as the city attorneys are in this room here.
Thank you, Mr. Laban. So without objection, that'll be the order. Thank you, very much. Madam Clerk, what we should do is recess the general meeting and go into the special meeting. So if we could do that at this time.
Yes, and the item on the special agenda today is a resolution, Labange for Weston Krikorian, relative to the establishment of the City of Los Angeles Municipal Elections Reform Commission.
Okay, Arno, I have Mr. Sachs. If you could come forward.
Yes, thank you. Very quickly, sir. While you're looking at trying to increase public participation, and it would help, again, if you were a little bit more ethically correct in some of the things you talked about. I brought up, again, Measure R, where the fantasy is it's going to be $1.3 billion, when the reality is that calls for a doubling of sales tax revenue. Not even close. But this is just quickly from the last election that was held for mayor. And this is a story from August 2nd, 2013. After all the money that was spent, Wendy Gruhl's debt is $680,000. Okay? We need to have a little look into what's being spent money-wise on some of the election, because when you're buying and selling electoral spots, the public is out of the loop. It's just not feasible for the public's participation when millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars are spent, candidates end up millions of dollars in debt, and you want public participation. They just aren't included in that. It just is not feasible for the 80% of the public that makes up the city's population. Maybe the top 20%, yes, but 80% no. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that, I don't know, where is George? Did you want to speak on this item? No, I can't. I mean, because if so, come forward. But you have number 1. So that I'm a little confused.
We're in the special meeting now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I assume there's only one thing on the agenda.
No, but it's 11. You're good. Go ahead.
All right. My apology.
No, I was confused.
As I understand it, the item is to consider a special commission, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So the goal is civic engagement, and it's a very laudable idea to create a special commission to engage on the subject of civic engagement. But I think that there is a great deal that the City Council and the Ethics Commission can do right now without the advice of a blue ribbon commission to engage in better civic engagement. For example, the fact that a ethics commissioner was nominated over a month ago, and the ethics, the rules committee did not act on that until today, is a great example of the lack of engagement on these kinds of issues.
George, I'm going to let you get away with it, but you know that's a stretch from the actual item.
That Aaron Pock was...
Let's stay on the item. It's not about Aaron. It's not about other...
waved through Aaron Pack.
George, help me here. You know the item, and you're a very smart guy. Can you stay on the item, please? Because if not, I have to ask you not to speak. So stay on the item. I'm asking you.
Civic engagement means being consistent to the voters of this city. That if you are spending time and resources convening a special commission on this subject and paying, in effect, hopefully more than lip service to that subject, then your behavior, your actual day-to-day behavior is also a very, very clear signal to the city of Los Angeles and its people and its voters.
Excuse me, Mr. President. He is still not talking about
He's
this.
trying hard, though, but you're not there, George. How much time does George have left?
1 or 2 seconds.
All right, George. Okay. Let's move forward on this item. Mr. Labange, did you have a statement? Okay, so then without objection.
And it was reviewed by the city attorney.
Yes, it was.
Thank you. Good. I'm for it.
So without objection, I'm going to suggest that we adopt this resolution, and we'll schedule it before the council in a very timely fashion.
And then, just one friendly amendment on that too would be that we look to the polling places to be consistent wherever the election is. Because sometimes it's in a rec center, sometimes it's in a church hall.
I agree with you.
You know, because people get upset. And the other thing too, I reserve my right, Mr. President, I want to push this forward, but I'm an old school municipal election guy.
I get it.
So I may not be there at the end, but I'm in there for the discussion.
No, the discussion is very important.
Thank you.
So without objection, that'll be the order. So we should adjourn this special meeting, return to the regular meeting, and then I believe we are now in the regular meeting, and I believe I have 2 general public comment cards. Arnold, I have you, and Mr. Walsh I saw earlier. John, if you could come up. But anyway, go on, Mr. Sachs.
Yes, thank you. And very quickly, in the news recently at LAX, dry ice bombs. The problem is not the dry ice bombs per se, but this is ongoing situation. This is not the first time this has happened in this country. I mean, there's been other stories of dry ice bombs in other places. Why there was no protocols at LAX put in place? You have an item on your agenda for the Homeland Security to look into port, blah, blah, blah. Why did not Homeland Security take into account the use of dry ice at LAX? And why wasn't it addressed prior to this situation? There should have been some protocols in place. Is it something in effect at Ontario Airport? Is there something in effect at Burbank Airport? Are the other airports that the airlines all use dry ice evidently for their...
Mr. President, his comments have to be within the jurisdiction of this committee.
Okay, so I get that. So Arnold, you can talk about it. Hold his time. You can talk about anything you want, but it's got to be within the jurisdiction of this
committee. You have an item on
committee.
your agenda, sir. Item number 4 refers to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to take stock in the remaining security gaps at U.S. ports. So I'm asking that the Homeland Security take stock at the gaps at the airports. And if dry ice bombs would be considered a celebration per se, I think the guy's facing federal time. So it's not necessarily a celebration. So for the city attorney to be so minute about the minutia of what I'm talking about, maybe somebody should put a dry ice bomb in his...
Thanks, Arnold. Thank you very much. Mr. Sachs?
John Walsh, blogging at HollywoodHighlands.org. As you can see, the meeting hasn't started. There's no TV, and you can see are there any children in the audience? Okay.
Stay.
Okay. Now, this is what the federal government, the judge, allows me to say. You guys are so fucking fucked up. Everything you do is fucked up. You just
the judge allows you to say that, but no. I can interrupt. Hold his time. I just did. You're showing a very limited vocabulary for a very, very intelligent man, and I respect the fact that you looked for children, but this is not your way, Mr. Walsh. And I'm just saying,
Not my time.
it is, oh, yeah,
Look.
we'll send you back to 1:30.
What's wrong with the word fuck?
Arno, I mean...
The judge in the Zuma Dog case said you could not restrict our language. Now, the city attorney says you cannot restrict our language, and you cannot interrupt me and
Mr.
heckle
City
me.
Attorney, does this committee have anything at all to do with that? Watch it. Yes. Mr. City Attorney?
Mr. Chair, his
Look,
comments...
he is disrupting the meeting. Mr. Walsh,
Actually,
please.
he is disrupting this meeting by continuing to talk over you, and you could rule that he's disrupting the meeting in that manner.
Okay, John, you realize... No, John, you know this committee has no jurisdiction over that, so just stick to the things that this committee can deal with. I don't want to take your time away.
Just what I'm going to say. I used the word fuck. He asked whether I could use the word fuck.
No, I didn't. We didn't ask
And what
that.
he said was he's disruptive because he's talking over you. By his silence, I can use the word fuck, and you fucked up the contract.
I didn't say you couldn't use it, Mr. Walsh. And I'm sorry, Arno. Please, Arno, I apologize.
You're insulting me again.
Okay, Mr. Walsh, please, for years you've been an upstanding individual, and now this is just not your personality. I don't understand it.
Okay, look, you had a fucked up contract with fucked up Tuda Saliba. You paid them $333 million to repair this.
He is not...
This committee
This
does
is not
not
within the
have
jurisdiction
anything.
of this committee.
In the council, you can say that, John. But in this committee, our jurisdiction is limited.
It's an ethics question. Anyway, none of this counts because it's not on television. And I don't need to spend my full 2 minutes. That's like jerking off in the dark when there's no TV camera.
Well, if some people, I guess, have to do that, Mr. Labange.
Well,
all right,
Mr. President, I just want to ask a technical question for the city attorney. Could you substitute the word truck for the word that he used and have the same impact? Thank you very much.
Okay, let's, you know what? General public, we haven't even started. Okay, general public is over. That concludes. There's no additional business on this committee's agenda. So with that, this committee is adjourned. Thank you.